Okay. Here we go. All right. So, gonna spend just a couple of minutes here um, walking through how to set up this OK for OK setup that we used for Oklahoma City. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up here just so you can see it. Okay, so OK for OK. We built this for Oklahoma City businesses who are trying to keep the doors open, keep things rolling with everything that's happening with COVID and coronavirus. And so I've made this clonable. We've had a few people who have jumped in to use this and are cloning it, but there have been some issues from people about how to take this piece right here, which is the submit form, and then to feed that through to Integromat. So we built this in Matt's profile, and you can see under his account, you can see the project here. I don't even have a copy of this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump in real quick, and I'm going to clone this, and I'm going to create a project. I'm going to call it the COVID directory test, and I'm going to create the project. So we'll just start from this point here. Go ahead and clone it. All right, perfect. Okay, so first things first, let's jump into the submit a business form. So when we jump in here, you'll notice that the form is set up, but this will not be entirely correct now. So location, I have 25 locations here. So what you can do is you can just export this. So I'm going to export. And when you export in Webflow now, one thing it does when you export your data from a collection is that it gives you the item IDs. So this is where we can get those, or if you don't want to get them this way, you can actually click into each item and get an item ID. So what I'm going to do to make this a lot easier is I'm going to cut this down to just a few locations to make it easier. So I'm going to remove a bunch of these just so you can do this a little quicker. Trying to add 25 of these will take a long time, and I want this to be fairly quick, so I'm going to delete this. Okay, so now I just have, once these delete, I'll just have 5 items here. Okay. Oh, it's not going to let me delete. Okay. Why is it not letting me delete? Because I'm using these somewhere they are referenced. What that means is I've got businesses in here that are referencing those. So one thing I could do is unlink, but just to move this along quickly, I'll show you how I'm doing this. So I'm just going to come into this location. I'm going to go into the settings here. And if you were cloning this, the one thing you could do if you ran into this is you could go to businesses, select all, and delete them because you wouldn't need them. And then you could delete your locations and categories and just however you saw fit. So I'm going to jump into the form field here. Let's just work with this first item, and that's the Asian district. That's what we'll submit to get this going. And you'll have to do this for every one of these. But I'm going to go to location, and I'm just going to sort it by name. If I click on Asian district, you'll see I get the item ID here. I'm just going to copy that. And then I want to replace it here. So wherever this is in the Asian district, the text, I'm going to leave the same, or you're going to change it to whatever your location is. And then you're going to paste in that new item ID there, and we'll have that. The same with categories. You'll need to go through each category item, and so we're going to use brewery. We'll just copy this. We're just going to do one of each instead of you watching me do 25 of these. So I'm going to take brewery and open up and replace these values. Now, the reason these values can't stay the same is in Webflow, whenever you create, you clone a project, especially if it's a clone of somebody else's, but it doesn't matter if you copy one of your own, somebody else's, these IDs change project to project. If you were to restore a backup, these IDs change. The hours, this is where it gets a little harder because this is actually an option field. So this is where we have to do a little bit of playing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up here and go into my project settings. Okay. Now that I'm in my project settings, I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And I'm going to come over here to integrations. Okay. Now down here, we're going to click this button. We're going to click generate an API token. That's what we're going to click. I'm actually going to drag this out of the window so you can't see my API token. I'm just going to grab it here and copy. But what you would need to do is you would need to use something similar to Postman, or there's a really cool service called Postwoman. .io that you could use. So either of these are a possibility. Okay, so you could use either of these, and this could be complicated, but I'm going to set up my space here real quick. So I'm just going to put in my token, and if you need help with this part, I do have a YouTube video that shows you how to use Postman with Webflow. But essentially, what you would do is you would work off the developer docs. So if you go to developers.webflow.com, the first thing you're going to need to do is to get sites. You want to list your sites. So it's this web address right here, api.webflow.com/sites, and that's what we're using. You'd have to add in your API key to get this. So we'll start here, and then we're going to hit send. And when we hit send, then it's going to show us our site. You can see this is my COVID directory test. And I can copy this ID. And then I'm going to make another API call. Now I need to get my collections. So on the developers.webflow.com, you can go to collections and list collections. And you'll notice it's api.webflow.com/sites/the site ID/collections. Well, we copied the site ID here. I just selected this, copied it. And then over here, I've got this all ready for me. So webflow.com/sites. I'm going to paste this in here, /collections. When I hit send, it's going to get all my collections. You can see business, category, location. Well, I need the business collection. So what I'm going to do is copy this collection ID, and then we're going to go back. Now we would want to list items. So I'm going to go to items here, and then what I would do is you could get single item, but what we want to do is we actually want to do something a little different. We want to get the schema. So it's like getting the items, but it is just a little different. And so what it would be, it's just like making this item call. Typically you would do items, and if I make that call, it's going to get all of my items in my collection. But if we remove items and just leave this collection ID, it shows us the schema. And then what we would do is under hours, you can see regular hours has an ID here, limited hours has an ID of this, temporarily closed had an ID of this. So we'd want to copy these, so we could bring these over and put them into Webflow. So under hours, we could say, which one I copied regular hours. So that's what we'll use, regular hours. And then I would want to copy all three of those. So copy all three of those and pull them over. Okay, so once you've done that, your form is ready to go. You wouldn't need to do anything else. But those three are kind of big steps, and they're a little complicated. The location and the category is actually kind of easy, just because those are reference fields. Now, if you wanted to make this even easier, one thing you could do is you could come into collections and you could add an hours collection, and then you could reference it from businesses, and then the item IDs would be available there. You wouldn't have to go through Postman to get all that. I used an option field just because I didn't want to have one more reference when I initially did this, but you could do it either way. So once you have all this, I'm just going to save it, and then I'm going to publish this site. And once it's published, if I could talk, we could open this up, and then we're ready to go. We've got this form. So then we would need to open up Integromat. Integromat, you have an account, you create a new scenario, and then it brings up this field right here. So we would just do this real quick. We just say Webflow, because that's a module we'll need, and we'll hit continue. And then we have our first module. So what we were going to do is we're going to click here and choose Webflow. And we're going to use a watch event. So watch event here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm going to, we're going to say add. And then Webflow connection here. In fact, I'm going to have to add this here. So I'm going to add in. I'm going to say this is my COVID test. Oh, COVID test connection. And then we're going to continue. It's going to bring up my Webflow account. I'm going to scroll all the way down and choose my last one. We're going to authorize that. You could give authorization to your entire account, so you don't have to do these piecemeal. But I kind of like to keep these separate. So then you could choose this, and then I could say form submission. So now I have an instant here. It's going to fire as soon as a form is submitted. So Webhook will say, of course, I did not name that. Oh, man. Add. Let's see here. This connection right here. Trigger type. For some reason that did not take. And then let's call this a COVID test so we can name that webhook. So we have it, we'll say save. I should add it there for some reason. That first time I didn't, but we got it. Okay, so we're good. We have this webhook. And so what's going to happen is this is going to fire every time a form is filled out here. So the hard part is knowing, what comes next. I guess it can be a little confusing. So it is not saving for some reason. Okay. So refreshing module data. Okay, so let's drop in another module, and we'll say create an item. So when it's submitted, we're going to create an item. And you'll notice here, when I drop it in, it automatically connects. So that's what we want to do. And we're going to create an item. Okay. And in fact, I'm going to unlink this real quick, just so we have it a little separate. And then I'm going to run this module only. So anytime you use Integromat, you need data to work with. So in order to get that data, you have to submit the form. So I'm going to turn that on to where it's watching, and then we're going to fill this out real quick. Just test.com. We said Asian District, I think, is the one we were using. Brewery, and the hours were regular. And then everything else, I kind of like to check everything and fill everything out just so I have something to work with. And then just filling this out, getting our data in here in the form quickly, just so we can see what this is like. I'm going to check all the boxes, and then we'll say this is the test. And then I can submit it. Boom. And then you'll notice up here, oh, I submitted the wrong one. Okay, let's go back here. My bad. That was the actual live one. This is going to be the COVID directory test. So let's do this one more time. Test.com. In fact, I'm going to copy this so I have it. Asian District, Brewery. And in fact, I want to refresh this real quick. Test. Just to make sure all my changes are in there. We'll say Asian District, Brewery, regular hours, because all those things should be correct. Then we'll just click all these really quickly. Okay, and then this is something, and then I'm going to submit it. So because it was watching here, you'll notice now I have this data. Everything we just submitted, test.com, test, all of that, and the name, email, form. So what I'm going to do is connect these, and then I'm going to set up a filter, and I'm going to say forms, because we have a contact form. What I'm going to say is if the name is equal to email form, then go ahead and run. If it's our contact form, then it won't run. And so then I can click on the second module because I do have some data here. And then I'm going to create a new item on this COVID test connection here. And I'm going to choose this site. And then I can choose a collection. I need to create a new business. Once I do that, it brings up the fields. So I can start working on these. The empty methods I don't touch. Image field I don't touch because we're adding it in manually afterwards. The website, I can click here and start pulling these in. So I'm going to say from the business website, location, from location. You can see that's the item ID we pasted in. Category, from category. We're just matching these. Hours, and one of the things you'll click here and it wants me to select. We can choose map and say hours. We'll map these gift card online to GC online, gift card in person, GC in person. The gift card link would go to the gift card website. So if I can find that. Actually, gift card website right here. Online store link, store website, phone number, online order link, order website. And then we're going to map all of these too. So let's just go through and we'll map it. Delivery apps. Yeah, are they using delivery apps? Yeah, true. Grubhub. Postmates. Postmates. We're just matching these up. DoorDash to DoorDash. And then Uber Eats to Uber Eats. Seamless to Seamless. Takeout to takeout, delivery to delivery here, and then we have curbside. We're going to match that to curbside. So basically what we're doing is when we toggle this map on, what we're saying is we're going to map it to what the form submission data is. So that's why we go through and we choose those, right? That's why we go through and choose these different options, because we're mapping it to what's coming in through the form itself, right? And then if we didn't map that, we'd have to go through and manually select, and that means every time we'd fire, what we selected would come through. So it wouldn't matter what the person submitted on the form, it would be what we had filled in here is going to happen every time. And so in order to make this data dynamic to match the form, we use that map function. Then we just use special instructions. We dump that in here, and then for the name, we're using the name field. And then we'll come down here and we'll say we don't want this to be archived, but we do want it to be a draft. So we can toggle. We don't even want to map this, right? We always want it to be a draft. And for us, we didn't want it to be live, because what we wanted to do is we wanted when people submitted, we wanted to be able to prove. Maybe people submit something that's a joke, or maybe somebody submits something that doesn't fit or that isn't. Maybe they're not open, or maybe what have you. You just kind of want to review it, make sure all the information's correct, and then we can jump into the designer and publish it. So I'm going to hit OK, and now I have my data. I can say run once, and I'm just going to run this. So It's waiting for a submission. So we have to do this again. So I'm just going to come in here and do test. And I'm just going to put in my piece here. We said Asian district. I want to say it was a brewery, and regular hours were the ones that we used. And then we'll say fake phone number. And then we can, these don't all have to be checked, but we can, choose some. And then this is something. And then if we submit, and you'll notice, boom, 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 those all happened. We created an item, and then what we can do is come back to our project, and if we refresh it, now we can come here and go to businesses. We have 101. Here's test.com, Asian district, brewery, regular hours, test, all of these things that I checked. This is something. And because it's my account that is authorized, it says I'm the one who added this. But this all runs in Integromat. Now, really, once we've done that, we just said run once. But what we could do is we can just turn this on and turn it to scheduling. And we say run immediately and activate. So that means as soon as someone submits something via this form, this is going to run and automatically create a draft item. Now, one of the things that we did was we took this and we added in another module, and we used Slack. And so, we created a message, and then what we did is we tied it to a Slack instance, and then we created a message with some of the data so we'd know when a submission came in so we could approve it. You could do this with email. You could just use the form submission notifications via Webflow. You could do, kind of whatever you wanted with this. So a real easy way to kind of get this set up and working. But then this is what it'll do. It'll just automatically form submission. It's going to create the item in Webflow. And then you have a filter here to make sure in a contact form does not jump in here. Now there is something that you can do. And I don't even know. I would have to, I think Matt set this up for us. So Integromat error handling. So we can look at this real quick. The basics. Oh, you can add an error handler. Oh, that's really great. So if you right click, you can add an error handler here, and you can say what you want to do if there's an error. So what we would do is we would say, hey, let's just ignore it. And so if there's an error, let's ignore it. The reason we do this is because let's say something happens and let's say you end up having to roll back to an earlier version of your site. You restore from a backup, and all of your items change, your IDs. And so you have to go back through this process again, the business locations, and you would have to update 25 items here, the values, or whatever it is. You'd have to go through and update these. And let's say you got one wrong. Or let's say somebody loaded the page, and then since you republished, they haven't refreshed that page. It's been open at a tab for 2 or 3 days, and they go to submit, and the old values are in there. Well, the way Integromat works is if there was an error, it would shut this off. This would no longer run. It would quit working, and then you'd have to come in and fix the errors. With this, you can say, okay, if there's an error, just ignore it. And then you can go look at your form submissions and find out, why it errored and add it in yourself. Or we could delete this module here, and we could add an error handler. And there's other things that you can do too. You can add different pieces. So one thing you could do is you could say, okay, you could add in maybe Google Sheets. And you could say, okay, well, if there's an error, go ahead and add this thing to a Google Sheet. So that way I have it in a Google Sheet. I know the things that have errored. And then go ahead and off of that error, send me a Slack message and say this errored. And I could go in and look, and I could export a CSV and import it in. So just a way to handle some of those errors and deal with some of those pieces that come along. So definitely something you can do, but I'm just going to go ahead and add this back in and say ignore. We'll ignore it if we have any problems. So that is setting up Integromat from scratch with a project. So high level overview again, one more time. These fields, this business location, business category. All of their options, you would leave the names the same so people could see them. But then what you would want to do is jump into each one, locations. You'd want to grab them, grab their item ID, and you'd want to put that in for the values, in here to make sure they match so they can map. And then you do the same with business categories, which is a collection. And then hours, I used hours from an option which makes it harder. We used Postman to grab those pieces and grab these IDs and put them in. If you wanted to, you could even delete this and put in, you could put in just a regular input, and you could make it a text field, and you could map it that way. I mean, you could do that, but where they could type in their hours. But on the homepage, we kind of had it set to where it showed those hours, and it's kind of standard, regular hours, limited hours, temporarily closed. And so we mapped those. Probably should have done this as a category, as a reference collection as well, but I didn't. That's my fault. But you could change that around if you want, so you could use those. But those all have to match. Then once you've done that, you just need to create a scenario where we're watching events. It's a Webflow Asset Watch, and we're doing form submissions. And then you need to have it running and go fill out your form once so you can pull in some of that data. And then we map all of that data over here. And then this lets us create a new item. So 2 modules. You can add an optional third if you wanted. And you can make this really complicated. You could dump it in an Airtable, and you could, do 15 different things with it, or you could dump it in a Google Sheet and turn it into a Glide app as well. So you could have all kinds of different things happening. But just wanted to show you kind of some of the power here in Integromat and a basic setup to kind of get started. So know it's still complicated. Want to be able to help those of you who are still trying to set some of these up. There have been 4 or 5 different people who've cloned this and now have it running in their cities or getting it running. And so super stoked to see what everybody's doing. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, and we'll do the best we can to support you. So hopefully this video helped.